Lastly, and this is the most important thing of the how, is refuse to play the zero-sum game. This is the thing that pisses me off more than anything else, is the zero-sum mentality of business. Right? The zero-sum game, you guys know what it is. It's a game when, if I win, you lose. There's only so much, win to go around. And the way that most people talk about business and startups is fundamentally zero-sum. The way that most people talk about business is using sports metaphors or war metaphors. They're fundamentally zero-sum. They're about winners and losers. They're about killing people. They're about, beating things. The zero-sum game isn't actually right. Also, people talk about disruption. Disruption is a side effect of successful entrepreneurship. It isn't the goal. People fetishize this idea of disruption, as if disruption is what you're trying to do. You're not, when you're a startup entrepreneur, you're not trying to disrupt anything. I mean, you are, I guess, if you're, a sociopath. But it's not like you're trying to disrupt something. You're trying to make something new and wonderful. You're trying to add value to the world. And yeah, you'll probably eliminate value from somebody else who's doing it incorrectly. But the value that you bring to the world is not proportional to the value that you take away. It's not like you're moving value around. It's not like, the value that Henry Ford brought to the world with cars was exactly equal to the value he took away from the horse industry. Right? Like there's more. He brought hundreds of thousands of times more value to the world to doing it. It's not like the value that Facebook created, in market cap is equal to the market cap they took away from MySpace. Right? It's a lot more. The disruption isn't a goal, it's a side effect. And if you think about it as a non-zero-sum game, it kind of becomes obvious. So in fact, I think that, but this is very pervasive. The zero-sum language is extremely pervasive. In fact, like here's an example. There's a Economist cover from a couple of months ago, and I don't know if you guys can see it. It says, "The survival of the biggest, the internet's warring giants." I'm kind of disappointed by this Economist cover. Because, I expect better. I expect better than this kind of thing. It's got 4 giant, monster squid, and they're labeled Amazon, Facebook, Google, and Apple, and they're fighting. And like, Microsoft's not on there, which has gotta hurt. Because I mean, what's worse than being depicted as a giant monster squid? Is like not being depicted as a giant monster squid. But anyway, that's not why I'm disappointed at The Economist. The Economist is actually, I love The Economist. There's only 2 publications. Well, there's 3 publications that I read, that I pay for on a regular basis. There's the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, The Economist, and it's because I read the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal all the time, but I also pay for The Economist because it's very important for me to be seen reading The Economist. So whenever I'm on an airplane, I need the person next to me to see that I'm reading The Economist, and that's worth $100 a year to me, so I pay for it. But survival of the biggest, the internet's warring giants, giant squid, and when I saw this cover, I thought, well, first of all, I'm not sure that giant squid fight. I don't know. In fact, come to think of it, I'm not sure those squid are fighting. Maybe it's just that the two economists in the little submersible don't really understand why mommy squid and daddy squid are. In fact, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense, because actually, if you're going to write about the history of the internet, it has much more to do with the non-zero-sum interactions of these companies than about their zero-sum interactions. The history of the internet has much more to do with how Apple and Facebook and Google and Amazon and Microsoft, absolutely Microsoft, interacted in a non-zero-sum way. Of course they competed, but they also helped each other, intentionally and unintentionally. The internet came about because of these companies made an ecosystem and worked sometimes together, sometimes against each other, but very much in a way that was about creating value, not just destroying value from other people. And so I think that having a startup is not zero-sum. Having a startup is not like playing baseball. Having a startup is not like a boxing match. It's more like playing in an orchestra. It's more like music than fighting. It's more like literature than sports. It's non-zero-sum. If you think of business as a musician, If you're a musician, you're not going to say, oh man, what are these other musicians? And they're also like writing and playing music. Oh, I better not do that. Right? I mean, yes, there's other musicians, and yes, they compete with you because you have to be, at least as good to play. But they also inspire you. They make you work harder. They create a whole that's much better than if this was a zero sum. And so I really think of business really much more, if you're going to use metaphors, and all metaphors are imperfect, I think a music metaphor or a literature metaphor is much better than a sports metaphor or a war metaphor. And this is actually especially true since, like an organization that never talks about zero sum anymore is the military. Like the military, if you've actually listened to anything that anyone in the military has said, like in the past maybe 20 years, and certainly in the past 10, it's not zero sum language. Like the military is all about, they've completely realized that like the military doesn't win by killing as many people as they can. They can only succeed by through a non-zero sum language. But entrepreneurship, business is the last bastion of this bullshit giant squid fighting, sports playing, giant squid playing sports language. And you don't have to do it. Lastly, consistency. We have a lot of stuff at Evernote. We have like 28 different versions of Evernote, and how to make them consistent, we don't. My favorite quote from R.W. Emerson, and only because it talks about hobgoblins, is a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. Basically what it means is if your goal is to make things consistent, the way you're going to achieve that is to make everything mediocre. If you want to make things the same, what's actually going to happen is you're going to make everything similarly shaped. And so and this is true of product design, but it's also true of everything. It's true of how you think about compensating people. It's true of how you build your team. It's true of your marketing. If you're driven by consistency as the end goal, you get lowest common denominator. You get mediocrity, which is easy to avoid. Instead, you should strive for greatness. Greatness individually, even if it's totally uneven and totally inconsistent with other areas. Once you have everything be equally great, consistency will emerge. Consistency is an emergent property of excellence. Instead of consistency, you should go for a point of view. Great products aren't neutral. They have a strong point of view. The point of view is reflected, is a reflection of the point of view of the people who made them. So here's our point of view. This is Evernote's point of view. We have three. One is the fundamental thing is trust. Evernote is about people, is for people who trust their customers and who trust their employees. It's not a good experience for people who don't. Everyone deserves great design, whether you're an individual, whether you're in a business. If you're in a business, maybe more so than if you're an individual, you deserve great design. And there's no tricks. We don't have growth hackers. We don't do incentivized downloads. We don't have any tricks. We're trying to make a 100-year no tricks business. Those are our points of view. You can have different points of view. Just remember that they'll be reflected in your product. You won't be able to hide them. So make sure that whatever is reflected is what you actually want to show. There's no exit strategy. If you're doing this right, this is your life's work. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do. You probably won't make any money. But if you do it right, you have a reasonable chance of actually making an impact, of actually changing the world. This is your life's work. And since it's your life's work, you don't need an exit strategy. So if you're thinking about exit strategy, you're doing it wrong. You're holding it wrong. You shouldn't have one. You should think about liquidity. You should think about all of this other stuff. You should think about how are my investors going to make money and so on. But there is no exit strategy for your life's work. And so if you have one, if you're focused on one, you're probably not engaged in your life's work. You probably insufficiently have a quest. And it's kind of sad because it's beneath you. Because you shouldn't bother working on something unless you're willing to make it the most important thing in your life. Thank you.